As President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. wraps up his first year in office, the Department of Migrant Workers, or DMW, also wraps up its first year of operations. Created in the administration of then-President Rodrigo Duterte in December 2021, the department dedicated to the needs of overseas Filipino workers only began full operations in 2023. Duterte had also appointed his own migrant worker secretary, Abdullah Mamao, but it was under Marcos' appointment of Susan Ople that the department took off. The creation of the DMW was not without criticism, with labor groups saying that this may institutionalize the country's dependence on labor export. But when it was created, some said to give it a chance. How has it fared so far? Hello, I'm Michelle Abad, and welcome to At Home Sa Abroad, Rappler's one-stop show for everything related to the Filipino diaspora. Here we discuss topics important to Filipinos all over the world, from concerns and welfare of overseas Filipino workers, to celebrating Pinoy success stories, to reconnecting with cultural roots, at iba pa. For our Marcos Year 1 episode, we speak to Carmel Abao, a political science professor who is part of the Working Group on Migration of Ateneo de Manila University's Political Science Department, and we also have with us virtually Erwin Lladoc, a Filipino community leader in Dubai. Melay, Erwin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with you, Melay. No? So, the DMW, let's go back in time a little bit. No? It was opposed by some sectors prior to creation. So, when it was created, some said to give it a chance. So, maybe can you remind us why there was criticism before?
Okay, I can only speak for the Working Group on Migration and the Center of Migrant Advocacy, of which I'm also a member of the board. At the time of the DMW proposal and the policy discussions, we raised at least two issues. One was from the standpoint of policy making, of sound and evidence-based policy making, kasi we thought that it wasn't very clear what needed fixing. Like, of course, all of us agreed that we should do better. We should protect our OFWs better, things can be improved, etc. But there was no, real or thorough audit, for example, of where the gaps were, what the opportunities were. So, yun lang yung aming, yun yung pinakaunan naming tanong, bakit? No? Hindi yun sapat na nasagot. Kasi we thought you can also improve the quality of services, improve speed, improve sufficiency, improve, care by, maybe enhancing some processes, not necessarily creating an entire new organization. Mm-hmm. On the second level, it's really more, I guess, ideological or discursive, no? Kasi when you create a separate department, you're really saying na parang it's here to stay. Mm-hmm. Migration is here to stay. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, it's always, migration, it's mobility is, that's our freedom. But we have the right to do that, but we're talking about really masses of Filipinos living abroad for work. So it's a question also of development policy. So when you create that, you're really incentivizing migration and saying that, in paper, we deny labor export kasi hindi nga commodity ang labor, so it cannot be exported. But in practice, especially with the creation of this kind of department that's devoted to migration, you're really saying, okay, we will now make migration safer, we will make it easier. So, anyone who wants to go can leave. Mm-hmm. And so parang yun yung tanong. Ang tanong kasi, yun ba talaga ang development policy natin? Yung magpapadala tayong manggagawa sa labas? Or magtatayo ba tayo ng mga industriya dito? Pagsisikapin natin may trabaho dito. Mm-hmm. Imbis na kailangan silang umalis. Mm-hmm. Siguro at those 2 points, yun ang aming nire-raise na issues noon. But the basic the basic concept of protecting migrant workers, of course, nobody says no to that. And we agree with the problems, etc., raised by the proponents of the DMW.
Some might say it was kind of good that it came in for Marcos at least, because President Marcos, before he was elected, he did talk about his plans to make the same type of strategy that his father made when his father was in power, of exporting workers, coming up with a program to be able to export our labor. And that's what he got with the first full operational year of the DMW, even if it was created by his predecessor, Rodrigo Duterte. So, as an overview, how would you assess the Marcos administration's migration governance so far? So, if you were talking about the stand of your affiliations last year, how about now?
I think when you look at the work of the President Marcos government, on their own terms and targets, I think successful sila. Last year, meron silang 9-point agenda. And top of that is really the creation of the DMW and also increased deployment. And I think you can say successful sila, especially because the budget was actually small. I took some notes. Their budget was actually 15.8 billion budget. And according to Secretary Susan Toots Ople, by the time of the first quarter, 566 million pesos lang na-release. So, ibig sabihin, since last year up to the first quarter of this year, yun lang ginamit ng pera, that's less than 4% of their proposed budget. So, in that way, parang marami silang nagawa, given very limited budgets, no? Tapos pag tinignan mo, yung una kasing sinabi ni Presidente ay kailangan maging tahanan yung DMW. I don't know to what extent tahanan siya, pero nangyayari siya. They have done the restructuring in the sense na they're going to, lan ba yun? They have of course, yung mga migrant workers offices, no? Sa mga foreign posts, 16 regional offices, and by the first quarter, they were filling up 1,000 job openings. And wala daw silang dinisplace. This is the claim of Secretary Ople, and if that indeed is true, no, that they were not able to, no worker was displaced despite the restructuring, then that's really an encouraging development. So itong dalawa, yun yung ating babantayan sa SONA kung anong sasabihin niya. Kasi yung increase in labor deployment, sinasabi din nila, si Secretary Ople has been very confident that they will reach pre-pandemic levels. No? So we will hear from the SONA also. So actually, in relation to the DMW proposal, when it came out, may pagka-general consensus na lang after all the debates is, okay, let's give it a chance. And now that it's there, I think in the words of the Executive Secretary of the CMA, no, si Ellen Sana, ang term niya ay, let's give it time. No? My colleague, Dr. Melissa Lau, also says na, let's see if indeed it will be an innovation. So, merong ganong acknowledgement na ginagawa nila, yung sinabi nilang gagawin nila. Now, the impact of that in terms of, positive outcomes really for our workers and for the country, I think that's the thing that remains to be seen. But again, that doesn't happen din kasi overnight, especially when you're talking about restructuring.
Okay. Thanks, Melay. So we'll go to Erwin now just to maybe understand this at a more micro level. So Erwin, can you help us be enlightened about the Filipino communities that you have there in Dubai? What are the most common concerns of the Filipino community in Dubai that require assistance from the government?
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Michelle, for inviting me to this platform. Yes, that is a timely questions that we Filipinos should address to the government. You know very well that Filipinos abroad are considered to be a modern heroes. And migrant workers have been pivotal to the growth and industry of our home country, which is the Philippines, and as well as the host country, where the people or the OFW are residing at the moment. And with regards to the growth and industry of the nation as a whole, with this in mind, the host country recognizes the importance of OFW and established laws to uphold their rights. Now, let's go back to supporting the OFW and what are to consider from assistance or require assistance from the government. See, there are things that has to be enlightened here. First thing, tourist visa and cross-country to look for employment resulting to acceptance of low salary and benefits. May mga Filipino na pumupunta dito as a tourist visa, cross-country. Then naghahanap sila ng mga trabaho or nakakahanap sila ng mga trabaho. But then they are not being recognized or registered sa Pilipinas. Now, what will be the role of the government for those who cannot find work or unsuccessful looking for the job or seeking for the job? I would rather ask the Philippine government for repatriation, payment of overstay, and plane ticket. And to add on that, I believe that the government should give a platform where Filipinos abroad have the basic knowledge on how to manage their financials. That will be a financial literacy, which basically the concern of Filipinos getting financial troubles here. You know that very well that isa sa pinakamataas na issue ng mga Filipino abroad is dahil sa utang or indebtedness. So instead of seeking legal services, I think mas okay na to deal with it from the root cause. We have to educate Filipinos, and that would only happen if the government will support the cause.
Thanks, Erwin. On that note, since you already mentioned, the different issues that Filipinos in Dubai are experiencing, such as coming into the country with tourist visas or perhaps sometimes not being aware of their rights and the resources that may be available to them. How has the coordination been like with the Philippine government whenever they need such assistance? I understand since you're a community leader, I feel like you're coordinating with both the groups and the government. So how has that been like, sir?
Well, to be honest, it has the same functions. The same functions except for assistance to national section, which will be transferred on July 1 from Consulate General to the Migrants Worker Office. So for me, as I observe and notice, they have the same function at all. And no such changes that is happening at the moment. Maybe in future, let's see if it works.
So far, sir, wala pa namang confusion. Like halimbawa, going to the consulate there in Dubai, and then they're redirecting you to, you should go speak to the migrant workers office. Or I understand kasi the migrant workers offices used to be called the POLOs, or the Philippine Overseas Labor Offices. So is there some confusion there, or is everything still smooth so far?
I think it's still smooth. There is no confusion at all. OFW or Philippine working here are knowledgeable enough where to go or which platform to go. If in case they want to address such question or such issue, maybe yung iba is hindi nakakalam, but then we have a certain announcement that is being given on their websites, where to go and how to address your concern at all.
Mm-hmm. And then how fast is the response, or like halimbawa, how smooth are the concerns being answered if, for example, any OFW who's not associated with any community approaches the MWO or the consulate, are they able to give whatever is needed, for example, repatriation or assistance in their legal status if they don't have anything other than a tourist visa? Is there a quick response?
Michelle, I believe that in everything that we have right now, there's always a procedure and a process. Sometimes, we cannot please everyone. I always believe on that. But then there is a procedure that needs to be implemented. Some people will just say whatever they want to say because, hindi sila satisfied. But then coming from, considering the shoes, put your shoes on the people on the consulate or on the MWO, I believe that they have the platforms that is being implemented and that has to be followed. And there are certain procedure that needs to be, followed by the people or by the OFW. We cannot just go there and just, hey, I need this thing instantly. No, we cannot. We have to follow a process. But then I believe, considering that I am very active in the Filipino community and associate myself with the consulate or with the MWO, I think they are doing their best. And I cannot comment on that. They are doing their best, particularly in serving the Filipino here in Dubai and Northern Emirates.
So would it be correct to say, sir, that the usual complaints are ang bagal nila sumagot, they're for some who might not consider, for example, the processes that go into the consulate and the MWO. Is that usually the concern? It's not that they haven't responded to me, it's more of they have not served me fast enough. Is that correct, sir?
As what I've said, that there's always a procedure that has to be followed, and we cannot get an instant answer to our questions or concern. But then I always believe that serving Filipino should be prioritized.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So maybe just for our audience, just to give a little bit of background. So the United Arab Emirates is one of the most popular host countries for OFWs, and it hosts around 700,000 Filipinos, according to a release from the Philippine news agency, and 450,000 of them are in Dubai. So just to give some perspective of what Erwin shared with us today. So I will go back to Melay on the targets that you also mentioned earlier from the DMW, from Secretary Ople. No? So Secretary Ople, at the beginning of the year in a Malacanang press conference, she mentioned the target at the beginning of the year to deploy more workers in 2023. So she may have been referring to economic recovery after the pandemic. Perhaps it might be a measure that we're going back to pre-pandemic levels if we're able to deploy more than during the pandemic years. But what are your thoughts on an active push for more overseas deployment?
I think, well, first, si Secretary Ople, I think what's really referring to recovery, no?
Yeah.
Kasi yun nga yung marching order ni President Marcos. And I think you're right about the active push. Kasi yung ginamit din niyang mga salita ay yung to increase deployment, right? So active yun, no? Na kumbaga pronouncement yun about active deployment. Now, what are my thoughts? Well, I think that we should really be protecting our OFWs abroad, but at the same time, we really need to rethink if labor export is indeed, the best development policy. Kasi alam na natin in history, in everyday life, na yung hindi ka naman uunlad talaga kung magre-rely ka lang, say, on remittances from this OFW. So siguro yun yung kailangan natin pagdebatihan. Paano ba talaga tayo masuunlad? Kasi the diaspora means there are more jobs there than here. So the question is, like, I don't know, maybe just an analogy. Parang ang tanong ay, do we keep sending seafarers overseas? do keep supplying seafarers, or do we build ships? Right? Because we know the more advanced economies are advanced because they build ships and they just hire our seafarers. So, yung ganong klaseng pag-iisip, yun ang tingin kong natatabunan ng active push. Diba? Kasi dahil active ka na nag-i-incentivize ng overseas employment, hindi mo na nakikita, muunlad ba talaga? Are there jobs here in our country? Jobs that will pay decent work, that will pay enough to given the standard of living, etc.
You mentioned the dependence on remittances. So I'm not sure if it's too early to tell or if you're able to assess a little bit. But do you think now, with 1 full year into Marcos administration, that we have become more dependent on remittances? And do you think that what are the implications of relying on OFW remittances as a development strategy?
I don't have the specific figures, no, yung year per year,
Yeah.
diba? Pero previously, during the pandemic, kasi we studied this, I think ang reality is, kahit may pandemic, nagpapadala silang pera, diba? So that itself is very indicative of, I don't know if the term is more, but definitely there's very heavy reliance on remittances, no? Yun nga yung sinasabi kanina ni Erwin na indebtedness, parang ang namin, nangungutang din kasi sila para lang makapagpadala ng pera dito, no? But yung remittance, I have the 2022 figure. Let me just check. The 2022 figure, for example, is remittances were at $13.4 billion, okay, in 2022 alone. That, i-compare mo yan sa foreign direct investment, on the same year, which is $9.2 billion US dollars. So in other words, when you're talking about FDI, which is really, in a way, parang capital for business, diba? As against remittances, which it's not really capital, it just goes into household consumption, diba? Mas malaki yung remittance. Kaya nga, consumption-led economy tayo. Kaya nga, lagi natin sinasabi, yung mga tao nagtataka, ang hirap ng bansa natin, ba't ang daming tao sa SM o sa, di ba? Kasi nga, may remittance nakakabilip tayo. But we're not able to really produce anything, build anything that will, that will generate more employment and more income. So, I think yung reliance ang danger kasi sa reliance sa OFWs is, the world is also very volatile. There are armed conflicts. There's a lot of unpeace. So anytime, and in the pandemic alone, alam natin, anytime, pwede silang umuwi. Pwede mawala yung remittance. So sasabi ko lang, can you imagine a situation where we won't have remittances and everything else is constant, babagsak yung ekonomiya natin. Diba? Kasi we even get more from that than from our foreign direct investment. And then you have the rest is what? I think almost 99% are small and medium scale enterprises. So it's really the economy that we need to look into, no? When we look at our remittances. Of course, for now, it really keeps us afloat, and I think it will continue to do that if nga wala tayong ibang alternative doon sa migration for work na phenomenon.
Before we move on to the next topic, I'd like to ask you, Erwin, about something that Melay said earlier about the remittances. Na sometimes, at least in maybe other parts of the world, there are some OFWs who have to take out loans just so that they can send money to their families. Are there similar challenges like this among the Filipinos in Dubai, and or if not, what are some other challenges that they have with their own families and finding work for their families?
Well, Michelle, I couldn't agree more with ma'am saying that in public, because that is true. and that is very transparent to all Filipinos abroad. You know, yung indebtedness dito is napakalaking percent when it comes to issue ng mga Pilipino. Yes, we are sending remittances, and some of them, all right, are loan from the bank. And that is the main issue that I can consider has to, to work out. Kasi mababaon yung ng utang yung mga OFW. And with that, syempre, maapektuhan yung pag-uwi nila. And lalo na ngayon na yung employment dito, hindi natin alam that tomorrow, mawawalan ka ng trabaho, and how will you cope up with your, loan sa bank? Paano mo mababayaran yun? So that is the main thing na kailangan i-address sa mga OFW, kung paano natin masusolusyonan ito.
All right. Erwin, let's go to another topic na about reintegration naman. So it's about our OFWs who are ready to go home. Palaging sinasabi ni Secretary Ople that when you go abroad, you should always have an exit plan. Otherwise, you're just going to stay abroad forever, no? So have we, so far, sir, in the administration of President Marcos, have we noticed any improvements in our reintegration systems? Are there more Filipinos in Dubai who are able to comfortably go home and feel secure about it?
Well, my answer to that, Michelle, would be the Philippine government should develop programs for OFWs who decided to go home for good. Opportunities for local employment for those who opted to continue working in the home country. And another thing that I should suggest is if a person or if a returning OFW should engage in business, why not giving them a minimal interest on bank loans and tax incentives? So those suggestions in accordance with the reintegration system, I believe that would help also us Filipinos or us returning OFW who decided to have an exit plan. But basically, people or OFW in Dubai is not 100% planned to go back home. But then they are going to cross-country like Canada, US, where opportunities are there. But if you are going to ask me about it, that would be my suggestion to give a local employment for a returning OFW who still wanted to work and continue working in the Philippines. And if I decided to go on business, give me some minimal interest on bank loans and tax incentives. That would be helpful for us.
Mm-hmm. Erwin, would you say that it's like a mix of what the Filipino community there wants to do as their next step in life? Like there's a fair share of Filipinos who want to go home, and then there's another fair share who want to go to another country. Is it really a mix, or is there something that's more dominant?
I think it's more dominant.
Which one?
Yeah. Well, depends on a person. Mm-hmm. If you really wanted to go home, then that's their decision. But you know very well that the country has, or should I say, a big interest or a huge interest of unemployment. Correct me if I'm wrong. How an OFW will survive if he's not prepared to go home yet. So what I mean to say is, you are correct. There is always an exit plan whenever a person or an OFW would love to return home for good.
Michelle, can
Sure.
I just say something?
Of course, yeah.
No, I was just going to add, if we look at the history kasi, di ba, 1970s. Mm-hmm. So makikita mo rin, yung mga naunang generations, ano na sila, ilang taon na sila ngayon, parang
Retiring age
retired
na, no?
na,
Yeah.
and so you have to think also in terms of generations,
Yeah.
na pabalik na yan. So, ang gagawin nila dito, of course, the best is passive income. They will have businesses, but given the economy, mahirap yan. So, I think concern talaga itong reintegration.
Erwin, paano po, very reflective ba yun sa inyo? Nakikita nyo ba sa community nyo na marami na ring retiring age in the community na gustong umuwi?
Oh, yes, yes. A lot. I actually, a lot of engineers, a lot of domestic worker, a lot of different works, category na gusto nang umuwi. But then ang pinoproblema nila, pag nandyan sila, what will be yung ano ang gagawin nila. So tama si ma'am na kailangan talaga is mayroon kang sinasabing bala na pag uuwi ka, mayroon kang investment, ano yung magiging passive income mo. So I think yung government should give a platform para matuto yung mga OFW kung paano talaga ang procedure na ikaw, at the end of the day, uuwi ka rin sa bansa mo. Ano ang gagawin mo sa bansa mo? Mayroon ka na bang ipon? Mayroon ka na bang investment? So that subject could always be the main thing to be reiterated to Filipinos abroad para paliliwanagan sila na maging ready kayo pag uuwi kayo. Make sure na nandun na kayo na hindi na kayo mag-iisip pang bumalik. I'm considering also for those people who are retiring, yes, syempre hindi na sila babalik. But for us, a young generation as well, we are more on to looking on opportunity and investment subject. Na pag kami uwi na, is hindi na kami maghihirap pa.
Erwin, anything else that you would like to share that what can be improved in the DNW or the Philippine government service to our Filipino community in Dubai?
Oh, yes, that is a timely relevant question, Michelle. I think the only thing that I can suggest is additional staff for migrant workers office, considering the added functions and presence of OFWs. Sa Dubai, ang daming OFW. And as what I said a while ago, I've been associated with, the service of the MWO, and I can see na kailangan talaga nila na dagdagan yung mga tao. They are lacking of workers office here. And with that, I think mapapagaan mas lalo at masaserve nila yung mga OFW sa mga services na kailangan natin at sa mga bagay na kailangan i-prioritize para sa mga OFW.
All right, thank you for that. We'll zoom out again for our last question for Melay. No? So what are some other things that you think can be improved or other things that you might find missing in our migration governance? And for its second year, what policy direction do you think the DMW should take?
Well, ang daming lumabas na recommendations from government itself and from the different civil society organizations. Just last March, I was part of this. There were consultations. There was a report of the UN Committee on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families. So I have the report. I can share that with you as well. Pero meron ding hango din ito sa third periodic report ng Philippine government. So, nandun na kung baga lahat ng recommendations. Pero siguro just coming from the civil society groups, a bit of rundown lang from the Center for Migrant Advocacy, they discussed the SSS. Kasi included na yung mga OFW sa SSS, nagko-contribute na sila. But the issue is, unlike here, na co-contributor yung employer, di mo mako-compel yung foreign employer to contribute. So it's actually burdensome to them. And even the PhilHealth, kasama sila sa PhilHealth, pero meron naman silang health benefits doon sa, diba, through their employer, etc. So the review of really their inclusion in our social security system and our healthcare has to be done. Yung sa amin, sa WGM, we raised the issue of training and deployment of the migrant workers officers. Kasi kahit yun nga, sabi, parang wala namang bago, pero restructuring eh. So may bago pa rin yun. So to make sure lang na magagawa nga yung mandate at train yung mga tao. We also raised the issue of patronage politics na sana hindi lang magamit ng mga politiko ba yung DMW, etc. From Scalabrini Migration Center, yung ni-raise nila, yung paano ba paghusayin yung Shared Government Information System on Migration. Yung from WAGI, the Women and Gender Institute of Miran College, ganun din yung si Jean Franco of UP Diliman, no? They raised, si Oye de Dios and si Jean raised the issue of the plight of women workers. Kasi alam natin, very gendered ang phenomenon ng migration. From the Philippine Migration Research Network, ang dami nilang issues na ni-raise at recommendations about healthcare for OFWs and their families, no? Especially given the pandemic. Yung sa Pinoy Care Workers Transnational, mga issues of course, illegal recruitment, especially of domestic workers, and issues of freedom of association, pag-uunyon ng mga OFWs. From Lawyers Without Borders, yung legal reforms that need to be done, yung Migrant Forum Asia, Sustainable and Portable Social Protection. So there's actually a list of very concrete recommendations. And if I may add, siguro just 3 things. Una, yung sana trabahuin talaga ng DMW yung awareness. Kumaga, include talaga yung mga manggagawa sa usapin na nakaka-apekto sa kanila. So, alam mo, sinasabi nga ni Erwin kanina, wala namang confusion in the sense, kasi pupunta lang talaga sila doon sa konsulado. Pero marami sa kanila, ito rin yung report ng mga caseworkers namin sa CMA, marami nila sa kanila, hindi man talaga alam kung na, uy, may MWO na pala or may ganon. So, I think malaga yon yung awareness raising. Pangalawa, we need to link yung OFW-related policy with foreign policy. We need to link migration policy with security policy because it's very, there's so much armed conflicts everywhere. Meron din tayong dispute pa with China, etc. So, hindi pwedeng ihiwalay mo ba yung migration policy dito sa mga to. And right now, I think, yun nga, dahil separate talaga yung DMW, hindi na siya, the necessary connections are not being made. And then last siguro is yung develop our industrial policy in the sense na we have to develop our domestic economy, diba? That will allow more people to stay here. And yung mention ko nga kanina, imbis na magpadala tayo ng mga manggagawa sa barko, baka pwede gumawa din tayong barko. Parang gano'n, no? And from there we can so it doesn't have to be, it doesn't really have to be shipbuilding, but it has to be some industries like, what are we really going to develop? You know, what are we going to contribute to the world also in terms of products and services? And that needs a lot of designing, that needs also a lot of reskilling ng mga manggagawa. Kasi depende sa kung anong ipopromote nating industriya. Dapat may skill, dapat skilled sila. Kasi yun din ang magja-justify. Hindi nyo kami pwedeng bigyan ng maliit na sahod kasi very skilled kami. Magaling kami sa trabaho namin. Hindi pwedeng mababa ang sahod sa mga ginagawa namin. So, yun nga. And of course, all of this while also continuing to protect our migrant workers abroad. So, yun lang. Medyo marami, no?
Yeah.
Pero so, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Melay, for that very comprehensive and very multi-sectoral, no? It's very intersectional, all of the recommendations from the group. Before you wrap up, Erwin, would you like to comment or add to anything that Melay mentioned about the recommendations and how it might reflect with your own community?
Well, I think Melay has spoken very well, and I will agree on that. And yes, we can, we can implement that suggestion coming from Melanie. I don't have a question on that at all or comment at all.
All right, sige. I think we can end on that note. So thank you, Melay and Erwin, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, you're tuned into At Home sa Abroad on Rappler. I'm Michelle Abad. Thank you for listening.